I'm excited to do this with you. I thought I brought some light to it. I want people to be able to have these open communications. And there's a lot of people who are in relationships. It doesn't have to be with a spouse or a partner. It could be a family member or, a friend, but they're in these relationships. And I think sometimes they feel stuck and they don't know how to get out, or they don't know how to find help or a resource to with the healing process, I guess is my
Or
is
they're
my
in denial. They're in denial.
for that. And that's something that I've also dealt with. Like, you go through these stages where you blame yourself, you think you're crazy. And this was something I did multiple times, and I beat myself down so low that it almost is like they win, because even if they're not realizing they're doing it, because I feel that sometimes not everybody knows that they're this way. This is their way of communicating, and this is their way of dealing. And what happens is you take up this role where it's like, okay, you can beat me down, you're going to beat me down, and I'm going to keep going. And then finally you just kind of break, and for me, I go into hiding. So my reaction is usually retreat and hide, and then kind of go down into this weird cocoon where I'm healing and trying to build myself back up,
Mhm.
which is really sad. Like, when I think about that, I'm like, that's not healthy, and I should never have to do that. And so I know you have dealt with this type of issue, and what did you want to add to, like, your thoughts on the episode, and what you would like to just give your 2 cents on, because I know you have experiences too.
Yeah, for sure. I first of all, I think like I loved that you used your personal experiences in the episode. And I also love that you're talking about verbal abuse, because I think, and when I said like they're in denial, I think a huge issue is that, and this comes from people not taking it seriously, or it's the Me Too movement. It's people not believing them, or things happening and being too afraid because they think they're going to be judged. Or so I think my biggest thing that I love that you talked about is, first of all, it's verbal abuse. It is abuse. It doesn't mean, abuse isn't only a physical thing that you can see. Sometimes the verbal abuse is worse. And, I know many women that like, oh, well, he just grabbed my wrist and it twisted. He's never hit me, or he just threw me up against the wall, but he's never hit me. And, we're talking about physical abuse right now, but that's also denial. That's
Mhm.
assuming that physical abuse means you have to leave a mark on my body. And that's not the case. And it's the same thing with verbal abuse. Uh, you don't necessarily see the marks on the outside, but it's on the inside. And then that stems into the whole, generational stuff. And that pain becomes anger. And then it's that cycle. It's that constant cycle, because that anger needs to come out somewhere. And then, like you said, you become a verbal abuser almost, in a way. Like, it can happen.
Where you become crazy. You feel like you're crazy because you're sitting there going, wait a minute, this isn't right. Like, something's wrong. You said something really interesting, and like, it's only the wrist, or only this, and we do that in both ways. I've caught myself saying, well, if they do this, then that's crossing the line. No, stop it. To quit creating boundaries there's no boundary on this. Like, there should never be this type of anything. I think we just, because we love somebody, or because it's not, if you didn't care about the person, you'd never allow it, right? Like,
Yeah.
we know that it's the people we love the most. So it's like, how do you judge, and where do you draw the line? Well, you draw the line the first time, and that is the hardest thing, because you don't see it. Because what happens is, passive aggressive speaking is also very abusive. It can be, and I've had this now goes into, with women to women, passive aggressive stuff. I've had people in my life that really hurt me, and like, I didn't know how to handle it, because it wasn't a spouse. It wasn't like, I'm like, how do I deal with this person who needs to be in my life, or has to be in my life? And you really have to get some boundaries with people. And if they don't listen, you have to be willing to cut them out. This has happened to me in multiple relationships where I've had to really walk away. And it's hard because they're really important people in my life, but they just can't be in my life at that time. And sometimes they come back and they're, it's crazy. So what you said, like when it gets to this point, or I think that is something I played that game, I danced that dance, and you finally get to a point and then it comes into the anger where you end up being angry and then you end up being like snipping back. And of course you're going to get angry and snip back at times. I'm not saying that every time you're mad we have to be perfect. Nobody gets mad. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're not talking about minor things or getting upset at times. That's going to happen. But when you get mad and you just puke on somebody, this hatred where you never do it otherwise. It's just like this trigger, or I hate the word trigger because I think people use it all the time. And I think we need to get over things too. But in this case, it's true. Like you'll get to a point where you're pushed so far and then you end up being the abuser back. And then you feel terrible because you're like, well, now I'm abusive too, and then you start to doubt it because you're like, well, I said that thing one time. Oh, this person is still doing it all the time to you. They're knocking you down. So I think it can be a very dangerous dance because it's so easy to let go because you just don't want to deal with it.
And before you know it, you've let go so much that it's moved so far, you keep moving your boundaries as they're pushing them. And before you know it, you wake up and you're like, what has happened? What is my life? How do I get out of this? Because now you're too deep. And I think that's also an issue. But one thing I want to bring up about what you were talking about is, it's one thing to be able to cut people out of your life and to recognize that verbal abuse, physical abuse, whether, it's a coworker or a significant other. But when it's your family and you're growing up and this is what you know, right? We learn from our parents. We learn from our environment. That's what we know. That's what we know must be right? We assume growing up like that. So, I know you talked about it, but like, how was that for you and moving forward? Like, and what would you recommend to people, that have kids that maybe have gone through that? Or
it's very challenging because first you have to accept that you're doing it. And I didn't want to accept that I was doing it. And this is where it took my own journey with it happening to me, and then processing it and being honest about it, and then going, but I've done this too, and how have I done it? And then thinking about, and I think healing my daughter and I's relationship, a lot of that's where it came from, is I chose to heal the hardest relationship, hers, and then me and my mother's, which that's a tango as well. But I mean, we're pretty good. I'm just saying, like, it's a mother-daughter, and we are, but we are good. And at the same time, I have to say we're good because we can communicate. We still talk. I mean, yes, I get frustrated, I get mad, but it's not screaming, and it's not, but that was the side of the family. It was like my mom and I screamed, and then I would scream at my daughter. I've noticed I've done it to my other kids a few times, and my son had actually pointed it out. It was a couple months ago, and I felt terrible because I don't do it a lot, but when I do it, they notice it. And so now I'm the person, like, if mom yells, they hate it. Like, they're like, whoa, and obviously if I'm frustrated, they have to also be mindful of me. But it's like, I don't need to yell. And I had to kind of check myself at the door again. It still comes up, but I've chose to accept my side in it. And I think that was the biggest healing moment. But you do need counseling. I think counseling or therapy, you have to have help with a second party that's not involved with you, like somebody who can guide you in this and also just show you the healthy way of communicating. And listen, I am not perfect. I have moments. I'm working. I'm a work in progress, but I feel that with people who have this in their family, and they might be like kind of sitting, maybe they're watching this or listening to this going, well, I do get frustrated when my mom or my dad did this. Why do this? And be honest about it. And it could have been an aunt or whoever. Could have been a sister or brother. But or if you've seen it in other parts of the family or around you, this is what you learn. You see it, you learn it, and you think this is how you cope, or this is how you communicate with other people. And it's just, it's not. We have to be better. So I think therapy, healers, whatever you can do. And I even brought up, pastor, minister, whoever, whatever your beliefs and systems are, definitely go down that road. But I think it's, I think it's interesting. I know you had brought up that you have had this happen to you, and you said that you had to remember that it wasn't about you. Let's talk about that, because I think a lot of us have to get to that place. We should never be in the place, but if you're experiencing something, how did you overcome some of that trauma?
Um, I had to find myself again. And, especially a lot of things happen when you're, for you as your family. For me, growing up, everyone has things. They can look back at their parents and the way they react. And it's like, how many times have you heard someone like, oh my gosh, I sound more and more like my mother as I get older or something. Um, but I would say relationship wise, like, I think codependency is a huge issue with people. And especially a lot of people don't, like, surprisingly, still to this day, a lot of people don't understand what that is. And when you become codependent and you become somebody's property, somebody's other half, and that's what you are. You aren't your own person anymore. You're their property. You're who they are, and you do what they need done. So because you're afraid you're going to get verbally abused, you make sure that everything is perfect, and it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. So then you start to have some control issues. This is just stuff that I've experienced. Um, you lose your identity when you walk away from it, but you have to understand that it's when you love someone, it's hard to walk away. But you need to, for yourself, if there's kids involved, for the kids, because that's what they're witnessing, you just have to get out. And the most important thing for me was like you were talking about counseling. Counseling has been amazing. And you also have to understand at some point, and I've heard you talk about this before, you have to step out of that victim story, because you can get stuck in that cycle. And that's the hardest thing. This is after the fact. This is stepping away from it. This is getting out of it. And you have to take accountability. You have to improve your self-awareness. I think that's so important, your self-awareness. Look inside. We have all these feelings every day, and we don't actually sit and think every time we have a feeling, right? Because the world moves quickly. Why am I feeling this way? Is it because of what that person said? Was what that person said so wrong? Or was it the way that I interpreted it? What's happened in my past and what's happened to me that's causing me to feel this way? And you have to really look at it. And what you're going to find is the places that need to heal. That's what's important. And then from there, it's doing the work, and it's the self-healing. But counseling would be the most important thing, I think, getting out of that, and also understanding that you can't be perfect, and that some kind of healing process. And this is something that someone told me when I first got out of a situation, grief and loss and, all of that. It's not linear. It's not a linear process. You're going to do really well for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, maybe for a couple of years, but you are going to have setbacks. Things will happen, but you'll have less. And what you need to do is find the tools to use. What helps you? Is it meditation? Is it deep breathing skills? Things like that. And it just, coping mechanisms become easier over time.
I agree. I think everything you said, and the codependency thing is it's such a big one, because you become unhealthy. You become unhealthy. It's an unhealthy dependency. And what people don't understand is they confuse it for their role. And then I will own this. I had an unhealthy dependency. And when I say that, it's with love, because I watched a mother do it, multiple times. We call her Liz Taylor. She's been married quite a few times. She I love her. But she had unhealthy relationships and they were abusive and that was hard, but some of it and a lot of that, I should say almost all of them, the ones I witnessed at least, were unhealthy codependency because you love this person, you go into a role that you up here think is the role, and it allows you to be hurt because it's this person can you're their it's almost like a property. When you say it like that, people get defensive. So when you say, well, I'm not property of anyone. No, but the best way to say it. Like
The way that you're treated.
the way that you're treated is like a property. And so they can treat you the way they want to because you're theirs.
Allow them to.
And then you allow them to because you think your role as a spouse or a partner is to be that way, to be complacent or to, and I or submissive. Now, this does not mean when I say that I'm very much for healthy marriages and healthy partnerships because I do believe that there's a king and a queen. But when I say that, the king isn't better than the queen and the queen isn't better than the king. They just have they have roles. Okay. And there's a role for a man and a husband and the masculine energy. And there's a role for the woman, the wife, and the feminine energy. And they both have to work together. And I think our society has told us different things. And really, if you go way back, that's not what was taught. That's not what was taught. Women were revered in many ways. And it's just like these roles got switched and it became a lot more negative and like a possession. We're not the possession. And the man isn't. I mean, this can happen another way too. This isn't just women.
I mentioned that in there. Like,
I did mention that. Oh, I have witnessed verbal. I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it, women doing it to men. So
and I've probably done it to men. Like,
yeah, I'm sure I have too. So it's not just one-sided. So I'm really careful when I say that because it's not. It's just that sometimes I think the roles of society, the old ones, they're changing dramatically as we speak. Man, woman, obviously there's multiple different, it's partnerships. I'll just say partnerships. But I really do see that there's one dominant, when there's one dominant and one submissive, it does always where it's codependency. And now they both can be codependent on each other too. And that's a whole other deal. But
yes,
it happens. And that's a really big deal. And I'm working on it as we speak, trying to fix some of my things. But, I think we don't like to be accountable sometimes because saying it out loud about ourselves is painful. And we feel like failures. I know I have. I know I felt like I'm the problem. I'm the loser. You'll call yourself names and you just put yourself down. And it's like, no, it's just accept it. And it's okay. Like if somebody's on here right now and they're like, wow, maybe I'm verbally abusive or maybe I'm really verbally harsh. We can say it that way. It doesn't mean that you're destroying people all the time. It just means that you use words and your expression and depending on how bad those words are or what you're doing with them, if you're cutting people with them, like sarcasm to form. Yeah. It's just owning it. It's not about pointing fingers and feeling like a terrible person. It's about owning it, healing it, and fixing it. That's it. Like, that's what we have to do. As a society, we've got to stop sitting in it. Like you said, no more victims. Don't be a victim. I can't be a victim. And I also can't dwell in my stuff. And I have to remind myself of that every day when I'm having bad days, when you have those setbacks and you're like, wow, I thought I was doing so well. You're like, shit, I was doing so well. And today sucked. It's going to happen.
They don't last as long. Like, when you had one bad setback day, it would take you out for 2 or 3 weeks. But now, over time, it's like, okay, I had a bad day, but tomorrow, the next day, you wake up and you're ready. Like, you're good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought it was an incredible episode. I loved your feedback. I loved everything that I know your thoughts and everything. And I think it's important to get these types of messages out and open the conversations because we got to stop not having them. Like, it's okay to talk about this. Oh my God, I've verbally abused too. Like you said, I've done it too. Like, we know that we've probably done it. It doesn't have to be this, oh my God, don't talk about it thing. It needs to be talked about all the time. So when somebody does it, they're put in a corner and treated like garbage. It's like, wait a minute, this person doesn't properly know how to communicate.
Yeah.
Fix it. Let's really fix it. Because it can be fixed. It can be healed. Everything can be. And even when it seems really hopeless. So I wanted to tell everybody that too. Any last thought for you?
Well, I think it was like, last week's episode with Megan, or with Monroe. I know she's like seeing all that. Like, you guys talked about healing, and it's giving people grace. Like, that's, I think, like, the name of your podcast is just, it's perfect in that case. Like, I think the whole world, with so many different things that are happening right now, it's giving grace, and it's being aware of what's going on in yourself. But when you give grace to someone else, you hope that, it's the butterfly effect. Like, they're going to go ahead and give grace to someone too. And the understanding, and we kind of slowly start to unravel that anger and release that knot. And then we can truly start to heal.
I love it.
In the future. So
I love it. Well, this is another Inside the Episode with Chelsea and Shylo. I love these. These are fun. Like, these are so much fun. So we'll catch you on the next one. And I'm excited for the next episode. We've got a couple really good people in lineup, and it's going to be good.
It'll be awesome. All right. Thanks, Shylo.